Hey everyone, Zian over here from Nintendo Life, and today we're here to share with you our review of Disaster Report 4 Summer Memories for the Nintendo Switch. This review was originally written by Pete Davison for NintendoLife.com, but was reworked into this video by me. Now let's get one thing out of the way immediately. Disaster Report 4 Summer Memories is the revival of what was originally set to be a game released on the PlayStation 3 back in 2011, and boy does it show. Disaster Report 4 is by far the worst performing Nintendo Switch game we may ever see on the console. Running on Unreal Engine 4, it certainly looks decent enough in screenshots, but the game never makes it up to 30 frames per second, let alone anything higher. In some areas like fast-paced cutscenes, the frames per second figure drops so low you can almost count it by eye. We're not kidding. Look for yourself. Thankfully though, there are no points in the game where the graphical performance is actively detrimental to your ability to do what is expected of you, and to the game's credit, it actually runs reasonably well, perhaps even better, in handheld mode due to the lower resolution. So if all of that's a deal breaker, as it very much can be for some people, you'll probably want to steer clear of Disaster Report 4. But if you're willing to deal with some of the technical jankiness and have an open mind, there's a seriously compelling and incredibly memorable experience to be had here. You take on the role of a customizable male or female protagonist as they arrive in a fictional but distinctly Tokyo-inspired city, ready for a job interview. Before you're able to arrive at your destination, however, a massive earthquake strikes, causing the bus you're riding to crash, and of course, the adventure begins. Prior to the earthquake, you're presented with a wide range of options that encourage you to think about what your priorities might be on visiting a big city, as well as how you might react if something terrible happened, and this continues as something of a pattern throughout the game. You typically have a broad range of possible reactions to the various situations you find yourself wrapped up in, rather than simple binary good or evil moral choices, though many of the decisions you are able to make might result in the same outcome or even have no impact on what is unfolding whatsoever. The fact that you're presented with regular opportunities to really reflect on what's happening gives the game a real feeling of role-playing and ownership over your character in the situations you encounter. Once you escape the wreckage of the bus, you're able to freely walk around, talk to any of the dozens of people in the area, and try to figure out what you should do next. Should you attempt to help people, or should you prioritize your own safety and look into escaping the city as soon as possible? It can be a little overwhelming to know where to begin since the game doesn't offer convenient floating waypoints and mission objectives for you to follow. Instead, you're trusted to investigate and explore for yourself, though triggering a cutscene is generally a signal that you're on the right track to uncovering something useful or important. And as you progress, you'll visit a wide range of very different areas, from the busy built-up city center to the wealthy suburbs and beyond to the very rural neighboring communities. And interestingly enough, the actual earthquake is one of the least important things about Disaster Report 4. While it's the catalyst for everything that follows, from that point on, it only occasionally rears its head as a gameplay mechanic, forcing you to determine the best course of action when an aftershock strikes. Stand still and brace yourself, or rush out from beneath a building that's about to crush you. Decide quickly, because despite the fact you have a life bar, in most of the game's actively dangerous situations, you're either alive or dead. No in-betweens. And there's no one catch-all answer either. What works when you're standing out on the open road most certainly won't serve you well while you're gingerly shimmying across windowsills in an attempt to reach a neighbor's patio. Instead, the focus of Disaster Report 4 is on people. Specifically, how people respond to a situation that throws normality out of the window and forces them to live their lives in a way they might not be familiar or comfortable with. This is explored in a number of ways. The distinctly Japanese cultural attitude of just getting on with things even when the unthinkable occurs is shown through the random passerbys you interact with, many of whom seem more frustrated that they can't get to work than they are terrified by the huge sinkholes that just opened up down the street. The human desire to help those in need shines brightly during a sequence where two neighboring communities in the midst of a vicious feud come together to put out some fires before they become worse. And throughout the narrative as a whole, we're given plenty of reminders that a disaster situation, regrettably, tends to bring out the worst in some people as much as it encourages the best in others. Whether that be through taking advantage of vulnerable people, using the situation to justify prejudice, or simply assuming that the normal rules and laws of society don't apply when everything is in turmoil. As the player character, you're not exempt from all this either. You can approach most situations as someone keen to help, someone reluctant to assist because they just want to escape, someone keen to make a fast yen off the back of people suffering, or someone who is just a genuinely horrible person. Your choices result in moral and immoral points. However, these have no gameplay function whatsoever, but serve as a simple numerical indication of how you've been living your virtual life amid the chaos. Decisions you make have long-lasting consequences, though. In some cases, characters live or die based on your specific actions, while in other cases, the various subplots that are weaved around the main story of your escape come to various conclusions, or not in some cases. The narrative comes to one of several very different finales according to the path you take, and is followed by an optional and fairly lengthy playable epilogue. This serves a couple of purposes. Firstly, to tie up any loose narrative ends that have been left hanging by the main game, and secondly, to give you an indication of some of the side quests, stories, and characters you might not have run into on your first playthrough, which will probably take you around 15 to 20 hours. You can then start a second run using what you learned from the first time around to perhaps make some different choices along the way, and see what else you can witness. From a technical perspective, the Switch port of Disaster Report 4 Summer Memories is an absolute, well, disaster. Narratively and artistically, however, it's one of the most fascinating games in recent memory. Its emotionally engaging exploration of a disastrous incident's human aftermath is about as far as it's possible to get from the Hollywood blockbuster treatment, and it's all the better for it. If you can fight past the technical shortcomings, which it's worth stating are pretty considerable, then you'll find an experience that's totally unique on Switch. And that's no mean feat when you consider the depth of the console's library. We here at Nintendo Life give Disaster Report 4 Summer Memories on the Nintendo Switch a 6 out of 10. If you'd like to read our full written review, you can find that over at nintendolife.com, along with more stories on Disaster Report 4. Now, I personally didn't spend as much time with the game as Pete obviously did, as I was just getting capture for the video and I was doing the narration, but from what I did play, Pete is not wrong. This game technically is an absolute mess. But there really is something about the characters and the story that made me feel compelled to continue playing, even though I have Animal Crossing New Horizons still sitting here I have like 100 hours into that. I was still interested in Disaster Report. It has some very touching moments, but it also has some strange stories and characters like you'd only find in something like Shenmue or the Yakuza series. But one major problem that I have with the game that Pete also touched on is the fact that the game doesn't really give you any direction. And it doesn't help that the frame rate is so low that when you're trying to run around the city and explore, it's just painful to try and get anywhere. And it doesn't help for the fact that at times when you're walking through the city, there might be 30 or 40 different people just standing in the city, and you can interact with all of them. And from what I could tell, everyone has at least a line or two of dialogue, but most of it is just fluff. It's pretty pointless. And what makes matters worse is if you go up to go talk to someone and you happen to be running and you bump into them, you'll have to wait like a second or two for them to regain control of their body. It's really irritating. But like Pete said, there is a really solid adventure here that's worth fighting for if you think you can stomach all of the technical problems. But I think that's all I really personally have to say about Disaster Report 4. Feel free to let us know in the comments down below if you've given this game a shot yourself, or if you've played any of the previous entries in the series, or if you're looking forward to getting your hands on this game. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like this, then why don't you save that subscribe button from a burning building by going ahead and giving it a good old click, and then ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we release new videos. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Zian from Nintendo Life, and we will see you next time.